This screencast lecture is going to talk you through our first lab that we do in class on the first day of school. This is called the bubblegum chomp, and it's going to be a lesson in rates. We're going to be studying rates. We're going to be studying the rate at which something moves. It could be essentially the time in which it takes to do something. So complete the question or hypothesis before doing the experiment. So the first thing you need to do is come up with a question. So I'm going to start off with an example question before I lead to a hypothesis. And I'm going to say, what is the rate in which I chomp or chew gum versus blow bubbles? So what I have here is a question. So what is the rate? That means I can test it, and it is definitely a question. Hypothesis. I suggest that I chew or chomp gum faster, and I could even say 2 times faster than I blow bubbles. So what I have here is a hypothesis. I can test this. And I have a question. So now let's get down to the bottom. So I'm going to read through here first. Materials: bubblegum, ruler, timer, pencil, calculator, whatever writing utensil you use. An experiment. Measure 10 centimeters of gum. So you'll have access to a ruler, and you'll have access to gum. So here's bubble tape. You're going to pull out 10 centimeters. Boom. Measure. Here's my 10 centimeters right here. I would tear it off right here. And in this case, for the sake of getting the lab going, I already have my gum, because you need to chew it for 2 minutes. So here's my gum. True story. That's my gum. So count the number of normal chomps in 10 seconds for 3 trials, and then find your averages. And you're going to record the number of chomps in the table below. You're going to repeat this with the number of bubbles. So I've helped set up an experiment for you. So I already did a couple just to get the ball rolling. So you're going to need a timer. And I'm going to use my phone, as I would anticipate you using your phones. And I'm going to go into stopwatch mode. And I'll do this right here in front of you. So I'm going to start chomping. Just a normal chomp as a chewing of the gum. Oh, close enough to 10 seconds. And I got 14. So I just chomped 14 times in 10 seconds. So notice the time for all of these is 10 seconds. So all of these times here are going to be 10 seconds. And my average number of chomps, if I add these up, right, add them, and then divide by the number of trials, so divide it by 3, I get a total of 13 chomps per 10 seconds. And my number of bubbles, I'll do that real quick. So here goes. 1, 2. Oh, I didn't get a third one out, so I got 2. So I averaged 2 bubbles per 10 seconds, right? 2 bubbles in 10 seconds. So now, if I flip this over, I can start getting into the analysis. And I can start evaluating what I did in the lab. So in the space below, calculate your number of chomps and bubbles per second. Right, per second, and then chomps and bubbles per minute, and then chomps and bubbles per hour. Include all calculations in units of measurement for full credit. So show your work. So chomps per second. If I refer to my data on page 1, I know that I had 13 chomps in 10 seconds, but I asked for it per 1 second. So if I divide my numerator by 10 seconds, I get 1.3 chomps per second. And I can do the same thing for bubbles. Here I had 2 bubbles per 10 seconds. If I divide both sides by 10, I find that I have 0.2 bubbles per second. So I have my rates per second. Chomps per second, bubbles per second. Bubbles go down here. Well, I also asked you to do chomps and bubbles per minute. Well, I know that there are, so if I do 1.3 chomps per 1 second, I know that there are 60 seconds in 1 minute. So I can take, and I can use my calculator here, and if I take 1.3 times 60, at that rate, I would have 78 chomps per minute. And therefore, at this rate of bubbles, I take 0.2 bubbles per second times 60 seconds, right? 0.2 times 60. I come up with, I would be able to blow 12 bubbles in 1 minute. And in order to get 78 chomps, so this would be my answer for the second part. In my third part, I could take 78 chomps per 1 minute. And I know that there are 60 minutes in 1 hour. I can take, let me clear that, 78 times 60. At that rate, I would chomp 4,680 chomps in 1 hour. 4,680. And if this is my chomps per minute, bubbles. I have 12 bubbles per 1 minute times 60 minutes in 1 hour, right? Minutes cancel. I can take 12 times 60, and I get 720 bubbles per 1 hour. So I've done the math. So what conclusion can I draw? Well, my conclusions, I always want to go back to my hypothesis. I suggest that I chomp or chew gum faster. Well, my data, notice I'm referencing data. So my conclusion always goes back to my hypothesis. I chew or chomp much faster than I blow bubbles. But I was right with that, but I was wrong because I made a prediction of 2 times faster, and I'm actually significantly faster. So notice 1.3 chomps per second, and here I blow bubbles at 0.2 bubbles per second. I chomp much faster than I blow bubbles, but I chomp at about 6 times faster rate than blowing bubbles. So I'm starting to look at rates, and we're doing this through bubblegum. So here I have a conclusion. My conclusion is based on my data. My data should always lead me into my conclusions. Conclusions are very important. So now, the last part of this is you're going to be looking at how to make a graph. You're going to create a line graph of your data. And there will be 2 lines drawn, one for chomps per second and one for bubbles per second. And I'll be doing this on another screencast. And there you have your first lab in freshman physics.